Hi, I'm Lucy Van Olden-Barneveld, and this is Creative Block. On today's show, photographer Mark Zielinski shows us the world through the lens of his camera.
The first book I did was in 1991, and I thought, I'm going to do this book and get this traveling out of my blood. No, it just made it's worse.
And Kim Kilpatrick talks about the art of storytelling in the dark.
When I'm creating a story, I think about the things that I know. So what something felt like or tasted like, or how people said things, what they said.
Mark Zielinski started off as a visual artist, but found painting to be too isolating. So he put down his brush and he picked up a camera and he headed out to the streets where he snapped his first portraits. 35 years and 7 continents later, Mark has published a collection of his photographs from his travels around the world, with proceeds being donated to charity. Mark Zielinski, welcome to Creative Block, and congratulations on the beautiful books and this charitable campaign. Nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Tell us more about this campaign. What are you trying to do with it?
Well, I've traveled around the world for 35 years working on these 3 books, which just coincidentally happened to be all finished at the same time. So I printed the 3 of them together and decided to print twice as many as I think I can sell, and donate about 7,000 copies to charities for children around the world.
And what are you hoping that will do?
Well, I'm finding a lot of different uses for the books. There's 3 very different books. One of them is called Untitled. It has no words in it at all. And that's photographs of people from different cultures, portraits from 70 countries. I've been working on that since 1975, so it's a lifelong work. And it occurred to me about 2 years ago. I was at a school in India where they had no resources at all, no floor in the school, no books, no internet, no electricity. It occurred to me that this book might be quite valuable in a place like that they would really appreciate having the world come to their village since they can't get out of their village.
Right, and Untitled has no words. There are no words in it.
No.
You don't have to be literate, which many of these children are
That's right.
not.
A lot of them are illiterate or don't speak English.
What's the reaction that you've had from children when you travel to photography, to beautiful photos? What's the reaction been?
Well, I delivered 40 books to Cambodia earlier this year. I went to a pagoda near Angkor Wat. And these are all rescued children some of them are rescued from the sex slave market. And they've been taken in by monks, and they're being taught, and they live at this orphanage. So I brought these books to them, and the reaction was great. It was really quite rewarding for me to watch other people benefiting through my experiences, because the experiences of making the books was fantastic. To see other people getting something out of that is really good.
35 years worth of photography. How on earth have you pared it down to 3 books?
I guess I've been editing along the way. I have been doing a little bit of planning as time goes on. One very new book is One Small Flame, and that has a foreword by Justin Trudeau and King Constantine. I call it new. It only took 26 years to do. It didn't take 35 years to do. That's a book about experiential education around the world. So it's United World Colleges, Outward Bound schools, and Round Square schools. And these are schools for world peace, compassion, and service.
Pick one of the photos for me from that book and,
Sure.
and describe why it's such a powerful photo to you.
Okay, there's a photo of a group of middle school Round Square students from Cape Town, a school called St. George's Grammar School. And I'd spent a day with them in Cape Town, and they asked me if I would go on a little adventure with them at the end of the day. And I had no idea where we were going. We drove for about two miles out of Cape Town into what they call a squatter's camp, or an informal settlement. Basically, it's a shanty town. Very, very severe, scary place. A lot of disease and murder and death. And these kids who are 12 to 14 years old, twice a week they put together a soup kitchen and drive out there and just start feeding people, keeping them alive, applying first aid to their kids. And so for the people in that squatters camp, the service that they receive is it's life-saving. It's very important. But for the kids that are doing the service, I think it's even more important in a way. They learn at a very young age that they're capable of making a difference and that they have the courage to do something. Most of us would like to see change in the world, but we don't know where to begin. We don't know how to scratch the surface, so they learn quite young that they can.
I want to go back to this book, Untitled, and share a couple of your stories from these photos as well. Pick one for me.
Well, there are just so many. Every story in the book has every picture has a great story behind it. In 2004, I visited a tribe in the Amazonas region of Peru, and it was very difficult to get there. It took me about 2 years to get permission to go there, and it was through an anthropologist who I actually finally got permission to do it. But I was going on their land with the understanding that if they didn't like me or I offended them, then they would kill me.
Risky.
Well, I didn't think that I was going to do anything that would really offend them, so I thought it would probably be okay. But actually, after about 2 days, I was a bit nervous, so I asked the anthropologist how it was going, and she said, "Look around you, what do you see?" And I said, "Everyone in the village, basically." She said, "If they didn't like you, that you wouldn't see them."
Leafing through the book, Mark, there are so many to choose from. What about this next one here?
This is a woman from Siberia, and she's used to swimming in cold water. And she's standing in this photo in a wet bikini, which isn't unusual, except that this is in Antarctica. and
yeah.
She's just been swimming with the penguins hopping around her for about 20 minutes.
She looks so serene for someone who is freezing.
She is. Well, she's from Siberia, used to cold water, and she's never had a cold in her life because her immune system is fortified from doing this. I was standing in a Mustang suit, which is good for -45 when I took this photo, and I felt like a wimp, believe me.
Oh,
yeah.
Obviously, your books sell well and you do well as a photographer. What was it about now? Why did you want to do this now, to give away 6,000 copies?
When you travel to some of the places that I've been, you really do appreciate how good we have it. And I just felt that it was my turn to share what I have with others. And I make books, that's what I do. I don't have a lot of money, so I can't give a lot of money to people in third world countries, but I can give them my books and share my experiences.
What kind of traveling is still left in you, do you think?
Oh, I hope to go to a lot of places, actually. The first book I did was in 1991, and I traveled to about 30 countries. That was called Outward Bound, The Inward Odyssey. And I thought, I'm going to do this book and get this traveling out of my blood. No, it just made it's worse now. I have to travel. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. I need to do it all the time.
And capturing all of the faces and the people in these books, obviously they trust you. Mm-hmm. What is the art of capturing a perfect photo like that, especially ones that have people in them?
Right. Well, the interesting thing is 90% of the people that are in those photos couldn't speak to me, and I couldn't speak to them. So I think we were communicating at a much different level. Through speech, things can get a little bit confused. Through body language, intuition, eye contact, and a communication on the level of the soul, I think it's a much better communication. So I was quite amazed, actually, how so many of these people were posing for me, and with such clear eyes, and it was quite clear that they were giving me their portrait.
And what do you think then makes a good photographer? Obviously, you have those right ingredients. I mean, is it a calmness that you have? Is it a gentleness that people sense that I can trust this guy to take my photo?
I don't know, really. I do know that I love people, and especially in rural areas, when you get out of cities and into areas where people are quite poor, they seem to be more generous. They seem to be more open. I love people in those situations, and I feel quite at home there. So perhaps they recognize that I respect them, that I care about them, and they give me their photos quite willingly.
And the traveling will continue, and the photos will continue to delight us.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks a lot, Mark.
Thank you.
Up next, another artist whose keen observations of human character have captivated audiences. Blind storyteller Kim Kilpatrick. That's right after the break. Welcome back to Creative Block. Our next guest is Kim Kilpatrick, who was born blind and grew up listening to stories. She shares her insightful observations of the human condition and daily life through her storytelling performances, her one-woman shows, and her blog.
There was a character in one of the wonderful stories my parents read to me, who said she was afraid of the dark. I couldn't understand it. Why would anyone be afraid of the dark?
I think that my blindness is a real asset to storytelling because I always heard books and audio and stories and voices and language. And the thing about storytelling, say as opposed to theater, is that storytelling, you don't have costumes. Sometimes people do wear a costume, but it's not critical to the story. So you don't have props usually. So it's just the voice and the language and the story. So that's what I grew up with. Even if I was at the theater or at a puppet show, for me it was all about the words and the language and the way they fit together. So for me, that really has assisted me. I have a good memory. Not that we memorize word for word, but I have to have a good memory. I think oftentimes people who are blind develop their memories, develop their sense of hearing. It's not that we're born with a miraculous sense of hearing and sense of touch for Braille and all of that, but I think we develop those senses more because we need to, and therefore I think that really helps me as a storyteller.
And I did love to color too, until that day when I realized I must have this thing called blind. I was coloring at our kitchen table, and I was making the same sounds my neighbors were making on their paper. I loved that. The smells of my scented markers, those industrious scratching sounds, and the feel of the paper.
My family would say that I always did storytelling, and my friends when I was little said that I did it all the time out of my imagination, making up tales and things and telling about creatures.
Here is my beautiful picture now, and I held it up for them to see. What in the world is that? It's a dragon, of course. Of course it was a dragon. I had been making the same sounds I heard them making, and I was imagining in my head. Surely that's what it took to put the dragon on the paper.
Because I was blind since birth, I also grew up listening to people read books. And storytelling isn't reading, but you're listening to the language and the audio language and the words and how they flow. And so I think for me, telling stories was natural because I was listening all the time to books and stories and audio books and records with fairy tales on them and all of that. So it was sort of a natural fit for me to be doing that.
And then just before recess, she gave me a card with bumps on it. This is your name in Braille, Kim. You're going to learn to read and write Braille after recess, learning to read with your hands. Oh boy.
It's an art form like others, so you do need to practice, even though sometimes it sounds like you're not practicing, you're just on stage talking. But the more I do, it seems the more I have to learn about storytelling.
Reading Braille was way better than reading print. Yeah, I soon discovered it because I could read it in the dark at night under the covers and not get caught. I could read it in the car and not get sick.
I like all kinds of stories, but I'm most known for telling autobiographical stories about what it's like growing up and being blind. A lot of it talks about that. And I started off doing that, and everybody really loved those stories. They are pretty unique and different because, you know, a lot of people don't know people who are blind, and so therefore they wonder about how I do things. And when it's in a story, it explains it without being boring. You know, this is how a blind person writes, this is how a blind person reads, this is what. So I think I'm doing it as an art, but it also is a good awareness and an icebreaker. And it's fun to create those things into stories, and people enjoy it, and I enjoy doing it. So I guess that's why I go there more, I suppose, than than other types of stories.
And I rode my bicycle, my wonderful tricycle, like all my friends had. And we rode our bikes round and round the courtyard in front of our houses. I followed my friends by listening to the swish swish of their bike wheels and their talking, laughing voices.
Some storytellers say that sometimes they look out in the audience and someone is looking bored or, falling asleep maybe or something, and I don't know. Now, I can get a feeling sense as to whether or not the crowd is really with me. I often get that feeling, they are with me.
What color are they, please? I don't know, I'm totally blind. Well, if they're red, that's okay, but if they're purple, that could be a problem. Do you think you could ask the people in your workshop what color they are?
I started off, I thought that I would need to use the imagery that everybody used, so a lot of that is visual imagery. And there were a few stories at the beginning that I told with visual images. There was a woman in one of the tales, and it said she was very, very ugly. And it described her face in great detail, and I couldn't remember that. But I thought, to me, if she was very ugly, she would have an ugly voice. So I said she had a voice that sounded like the crows fighting in the trees. And for me, it was a strong image, and it was a natural image for me to remember. And then other people could see what they saw, which often they did see a visual image of her as someone who wasn't particularly attractive looking. So I gave up that I had to use the same words and images as other people. So when I'm creating a story, I think about the things that I know. So what something felt like or tasted like, or how people said things, what they said, the dialogue.
Green smelled like mint, and brown smelled like cinnamon or chocolate, and yellow smelled like lemon. And as I thought of the yellow lemon, I took that marker and I made a lemon yellow sun at the top of my paper.
When I was small, we'd be somewhere in public and people would be people watching, but I would listen to conversations. So people would say, I would say, oh, those people are fighting. Then my parents would say, it's not nice to listen to other. And I would say, well, you're watching everyone. I don't know what else I can do. So again, it's kind of relying on the things that you know, the senses you have and know, and other people will get visual images.
I will listen to the stars singing, they sound like bells, and then I will touch the sun.
So you don't really know what an audience or what any person in an audience will feel when you give them a piece of art, because everyone comes in, you don't know, they might have someone in their family that has just lost a lot of vision. They would have a different reaction than someone who was blind themselves, or than someone who had never experienced anything to do with blind people. So I don't sort of second guess that anymore, but I guess what I try to do is I try to give them the best piece of art that I can create, and then what they take away is what they take away. I do hope, though, that it will break down some barriers about people with disabilities.
Moaning and groaning when this is my friend Leona Lisa.
Kim Kilpatrick returns after the break. She'll perform one of her stories in our studio. That's next. Welcome back to Creative Block. From her one-woman show, Flying in the Dark, here's Kim Kilpatrick.
I don't know if you've ever seen a totally blind person filled with indignation. It can be kind of a scary sight, really. If they're using a cane, they might swing it back and forth really fast. But I had my dog with me, so I was just telling her to hurry up as I went quickly along the nursing home corridor to the nurse's desk. We walked right up to the nurse's desk, and my friend was working there. She said, "Good morning, Kim. How are you? I need to talk to you about something." I said, "Okay." I was just about to take Jack for a music therapy session. He agreed to play for the ladies in the music group, to play his banjo. It had taken me weeks to convince him to do it. "I know, Kim, but the thing is that, let me finish." Okay. I had spent weeks trying to convince him, and finally this morning he said he would go and play the banjo for the ladies, and I was about to take him there. "But Kim, the thing is that, let me finish," I said. Okay. I was just about to take him there. I can do that myself. He was going to come and play for the ladies, and then one of your staff came and grabbed him away from me. Now, I know what you do as nurses is very important, but what I do as a music therapist is equally as important, and more important to Jack in some ways, because he isn't able to talk too much anymore, but he can still sing and he can still play his banjo. I know, Kim, he loves to play his banjo. Are you finished? Yes, I'm finished. I felt very proud of myself. I'd advocated for Jack and music therapy. Well, the reason that we took Jack away from you, Kim, was not because what you do isn't important. It was because he was totally naked. He was totally naked, I said. Yes, that's right. Oh, well, that's all right then. Thank you very much, I said, and I turned away, and I walked very slowly with my head down the hall of the nursing home, no longer filled with indignation.
Creative Block is your platform to see talented artists who are passionate about their work. If you'd like more information about the people we've featured today, check out our website or Facebook page. And be sure to drop us a line about your favorite literary artist. Our email address is creativeblock@cbc.ca. I'm Lucy Van Olden Barneveld. See you next time.